It's the Daily Boo. We've got an exclusive. I'm here with renowned author, journalist, ghost hunter, super podcaster, none other than the Jeff Belanger. Jeff.
Hey.
Good evening.
Good evening.
How are you?
I'm well, thank you. How are you?
I'm pretty good. It's even better now that I've got this chance to speak to you after such a hectic day.
It's grueling sometimes, isn't it?
Yeah.
But it's pretty cool to see all these people come together and share these different ideas. We had UFO people, and we had cryptid people, and ghost people, and we realized that we're all a little bit crazy.
Yeah, we are. But you've got a crazy month coming up.
Yeah.
Tell us about it.
So every fall I do a story tour, and it's one of my favorite things to do because one of the things that I'm most passionate about is folklore and legends and the way that they connect us with each other and with our history and with our communities. And so I'm always working on new stories, and then every fall you get to present them in front of a live audience. And when you're a writer, if you write books, you don't get to sit in their lap when they read them and see, oh, that's good, or this is good. And when you're a podcaster, you hope that they're enjoyed, but you don't get to be in their ears while they listen. But when you tell stories in front of a live audience, you get to see the reaction and you get immediate feedback. And I love that. And I love to know when a story works, because that fascinates me too. Like, why are we so drawn to certain stories and certain ideas and not others? And I think that speaks to really our society in general, like where we're at in that moment.
Now, you're a New England native.
Yes.
Massachusetts native?
Massachusetts native, yeah.
What draws you to want to explore the legends of this great state?
So, when I first started in my career, the first book I ever wrote, if I could shamelessly plug it, was called The World's Most Haunted Places. And I was always a very global thinking person, and I worked on other books that were very global in what I do. I worked for the Travel Channel, which is, global, obviously. And so one of the traps you can fall into is to think that all the really cool places are somewhere far from where you live. And then you realize, well, Massachusetts and New England is really far from the rest of the world, And so I started turning my own eyes to places that were a lot more accessible to me. I don't need to get on a plane to go to some of these places. And the more you find, the more you realize, wow, this is connected to this over here. And I think there's something about where you're from. And maybe I've gotten older too, I'm in my 40s now. And you start to get a little more retrospective and look at yourself and say, well, why am I who I am right now? And how did I get here? And you start thinking about your own upbringing and your own influences. And most of your influences, most of us will find, come from your family first, then your community, your friends, where you visited, and so on. And so you start to, if nothing else, to understand myself. I wanted to understand the legends that have shaped my community and then shaped my friends and my family and ultimately me. And all of us can do that, right? I mean, it's an amazing thing, and it's a great way to travel. If you are traveling looking for legends, wherever you go, I've noticed that immediately I cease to be some cheesy tourist. I remember being the first time I went to London, and everyone's there like, American tourist, okay. And I said, I'm actually really interested in haunted places. And they go, really? I heard about this pub. And go in and ask for John, who works at the bar, and he'll tell you. And you go in and you ask for John, and John says, really? Well, yeah, I was working here and I saw this thing come down the stairs, and I don't know, would you like a drink? And next thing you know, you're not a cheesy tourist anymore. You are underneath the surface and you're talking about something that's personal and related to exactly where you are. And that works everywhere. Everywhere I've ever been, whether locally or internationally, it works. And in the end, I love connecting with people and finding that we have a lot more in common than we don't.
Is there one particular case in New England that really intrigued you more than any other?
Oh, there's so many. And it's so hard to. It's like if you had like 10 children, which is your favorite, and you go, well, really, there is the one. But I feel like I like how some stories get so interconnected, and people get passionate about them, either passionately believing in them or passionately feeling, no, it's got to be bunk. But it doesn't matter. In the end, we're still talking about it. And I think, so for example, we have a lot of sea serpents and lake monsters. And when you go through old newspaper archives, what's fascinating is at one point the sea serpents were coming up so often in the Boston Globe, which is a major newspaper here in Massachusetts. It was coming up so often they actually ran a short editorial saying we are no longer going to cover the sea serpent sightings because the fact that it exists is a foregone conclusion. There's been too many witnesses, too much coverage. We're not going to cover deer sightings either, right? Like, it's just, they're around all the time. And I love that. I love when something gets normalized and then it goes away. And now we're all saying, where'd the sea serpents go? Could it be that those harbors have now been so overfished that an animal that large has moved on to where it can find food, and it's not going to find food where all these boats are fishing every day? And that really fascinates me. You know, I love anything that shakes up what we thought we knew, and we find that all the time. In school, we were always told Christopher Columbus discovered America, which is silly, of course, because there was a lot of people here when he arrived. But we're learning more and more that there was European contact long before Christopher Columbus. The Vikings came down, and there's these rune stones, and we find these other relics of Viking contact, and who knows who else? Celtic, maybe even. Some of the structures around here seem to be Celtic in origin, and I love that. I love anything that can shake up the world that you thought you knew.
And you touched on the fact that you've been to the UK. Is there a place in the UK that really sort of struck you? As a place that you think, I really like it here. I'd like to come back and investigate it more.
Oh, so as I told you privately earlier, I got to go as a guest of one of the yeoman warders to the Tower of London, which was such an honor. I had written about it in my first book, World's Most Haunted Places. Can't have a book called that without a Tower of London chapter, of course. And one of the yeoman warders I had interviewed, I contacted him. I said, hey, I'm actually going to be in London. He said, as my guest, why don't you come see the changing of the keys? I'll show you around and we can have a drink in the Yeoman Warders pub. And it was just such an amazing night. Someone told me that the ghost of Anne Boleyn tends to show up on the bank of the Thames during the whole ceremony. And so if the whole ceremony is this way, everybody faces this way, everyone yells, God save the Queen, and the Thames is behind me. And everyone's looking forward, and I'm the one guy going, God save the Queen! Because if she's right behind me, I don't want to miss that. That would be incredible. And then after that, he showed us around. He showed us in the chapel and told us a story about how one of the women who cleaned the chapel, they have these kneelers behind on the back of every chair. And she said she had put them all up, and one by one they were going thunk, 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 thunk down, and she just ran out for the night. And he showed me places where he'd had weird experiences and other stories that he's heard. And we were in the Yeoman Warder pub, and I was talking to one of the youngest guys who was in his 40s. He's the baby. He's the youngest Yeoman Warder. And he had said that his first night in the Tower of London, he had gone to bed, and he had a teddy bear from childhood up on one of the shelves. And he said, so I lay down on my bed, and I'm just starting to relax, and all of a sudden the teddy bear floats out into the middle of the room, drops to the floor, and he's in his very matter-of-fact British way. He says, so I guess I was just introduced to the ghost of the Tower of London. And I just went, that's amazing. That's fantastic, and everyone had a story, and I loved the tower. I would love to spend all night there. I don't know if that could ever make that happen, but you never know.
Not wanting to give you an idea for another book, but do you think there's an interesting connection between Old England and New England when it comes to their ghosts?
Oh, absolutely. And having traveled all around the U.S. and all over the world, so I've noticed when I'm in Old England, there's a very matter-of-fact attitude about hauntings. I was looking at a place called Ordsall Hall up near Manchester, right? And talking to one of the docents, and I said, so is this place haunted? And he was indignant. He said, it's a 700-year-old manor house. Of course it's haunted. And I said, well, of course, I'm sorry. Of course, you're right. Of course. Here in New England, I think we have a lot of those same sensibilities. We're very matter-of-fact about our history. We don't have to get into big debates about what a ghost is or what it means, but people will say, like, well, yeah, you go down some of our streets, and that's what it looked like 300 years ago. I mean, yes, now there's telephone poles and electric wires and lights and so on, but those houses were still there. We preserve our history here in this part of the country. So the bends in the road and everything else, that's what our ancestors saw in colonial times. The town names, of course, they're all from England. There's so many. So I feel like we have that sensibility. When you go to the southern part of the U.S., it turns very much into a religious discussion. Like, well, no, it's angels or demons, and we don't talk about that. And it becomes this religious debate. In the West Coast, and I'm generalizing, and it's totally not fair. Of course, there's exceptions everywhere. but on the West Coast it could be more about like, oh, it's the energies of the earth and not so much like ghosts and so here it's just it's haunted. I don't know what that means, but it's haunted. People talk about seeing ghosts, and that's that. And I love that sensibility of it.
And lastly,
yes,
you're just like me. You like your audio production and your podcasts. Tell us about the one that you're working on at the moment.
So every week I do a new story called New England Legends. They're about 10 to 12 minutes in length. They're produced, sound effects, voice actors, the whole thing. And the whole idea is I want to take you into the stories, the places that I go every week, into legends. And we cover everything from UFO legends to strange history to haunted places to cryptids and so on. All the weird things that make this region the special place that it is. And it's home. I love traveling. I love seeing the world. But this very weird place called New England will always be my home.
And where can people find out more?
You can go to ournewenglandlegends.com. You can go to my website, jeffbelanger.com. Find me on Twitter, Facebook, whatever. Every week I post the new episodes. They're all free. They're on iTunes and Stitcher and Google Play and all that other stuff.
Brilliant. Jeff, I've read a few of your books. Absolutely loved them. It's been a pleasure to meet you.
Yeah.
And thanks for talking to the Daily Boo.
Thank you. Fist bump.